Welcome to the Chief Aim podcast. This is your weekly dose of real experiences, insights, strategies, and action steps for entrepreneurs who want to build and are building something incredible. Welcome back to the Chief Aim podcast. My name is Jason Graystone.
My name's Seb Bates.
And we're back again. And hopefully you're enjoying this podcast so far. As always, if you haven't already subscribed to it, make sure you subscribe. Most people that watch these things don't subscribe to the channels. So go and give the little subscribe button a little tickle, and it'll make sure that you never miss an episode of myself and Seb basically using this as an opportunity to have a chat every week, which we enjoy probably more than most people. But anyway,
you could say we're pretty congruent with our
we're pretty congruent, yeah, exactly. And actually, I've had a lot of people say how transparently obvious it is how we get along, like how we gel and stuff like that with this podcast. So yeah. that is
which couldn't be further from the truth, could it? Really? I mean, it's weird, you know. We're just very good at pretending. That's all it is, guys.
I know. It's like
we tolerate each other.
Those actors, you see the actors who they have like a love affair in the film, and then you find out they hated each other on set, and it's like, what? How did you do that?
Jason, you've been banging on this love affair for too long now. we're getting to the main source of why he started the Chief Aim podcast now, aren't we?
Amazing. Anyway, congruency. Congruency. What are we talking about? Business. Congruency.
Congruency in business, in life, in decisions, in actions.
Yeah, life, decisions, business, everything. First of all, congruency. What is it? It's when your thoughts and actions and beliefs and what you say you do and what you do all aligns. That's congruency. And why that's important. One, I run a podcast called Always Free, and Always Free to me is about your journey of becoming more and more you. Okay, so that you are like more you than ever, so that you do things that align with your values, and you make money doing that, and you live doing that, and you serve people doing that, and you have all the experiences that you truly want for you and your loved ones, and you don't look up to other people, and you don't do this and that and the other. You just do you, and that's a congruent path to take, right? That is something where you're on a mission for congruency. So it's very much embedded in what I do in my life and in my business, like this podcast with Seb. I wouldn't be one of these people to do this kind of fake conversation where you get on for the sake of it. I work with people I want to work with, that I enjoy being around, and that's congruency. The reason it's important is in my opinion, is in life, it's important because it keeps you focused on one path that's very, you don't need as much motivation to follow that path. You're doing things that are very easy to make decisions on because it's like, well, does it align with this or not? You're basically following a path that's very natural. So that's in life. In business, what I see people do is they go and they do partnerships and they agree to things or feature people on their show or go and, they mingle with things and do deals and affiliate things and all this kind of stuff where it can be actually really damaging to something you're building. Because the thing is, in my opinion, people buy into congruency. They want people to trust. They want to look up to people to trust, and they want a hand to lead them and guide them, right? Now, if you're doing the deals with any Tom, Dick and Harry, right, you start to sell out and people start losing trust in you. Your business starts to crumble, your life starts to crumble, and you lose touch of who you are because you're not yourself anymore. You're now being, someone's got one over on you, or you owe someone something, or they, and it kind of starts getting into this murky area of, you lose your identity and you start putting out mixed messages and you lose trust. So that's why it's important, and that's kind of what it is in a nutshell to me, Seb. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's two ways of looking at that, right? On one hand, I feel like as you grow your business, more and more opportunities are attracted to you and you're attracted to other opportunities, right? Yeah. I think for a lot of people as well, as their business becomes successful and they've done it for a while, they get a bit bored and they start to look a bit off-piste. And so a lot of the time what you'll see is someone who's got an amazing, successful business suddenly break out and, they're doing something else. And you're looking at them like, weren't you the business coach and now you're doing this? Or do you know what I mean? Something like that. Something completely different, often just because they're bored. I spent the last 15 years doing one thing. Literally one thing. When you look at my videos, I talk about the same thing all the time. And I said to my video editor or camera lady, Swati, who follows me around, does all the sort of like a D-Rock sort of situation. And I said to her before we started working together, you might get really bored of me saying the same thing. But I said to her, I get better and better at saying it differently. And I'll just find a million ways of saying it. And someone said to me the other day, look, are you all ready to go on the radio? I was on the radio the other day. And I said, well, I don't need to do any prep because I'm just talking about the same thing I always talk about, really. And so congruency starts to compound and show up later on in life. Initially, you can get itchy feet because you want to try different things, especially as a startup, right? You're like, is this the right thing to do? Should I do that? Should I do this? But often once you've found something that works, and I'm not just saying this is the same product or service, I'm saying congruency is a value. It's your set of values. It's your beliefs. It's what you talk about.
Same message.
Exactly. It's deeper than the product or service you've got, right? So I believe in empowering young people. I believe in character development. I believe that it's the most important yet often missing aspect of a child's education. I believe that we need to teach young people to be resilient. I believe that we need to have better relationships with pressure, not so that we avoid pressure, but that we handle it better. And I believe that we can learn a lot from old school martial arts ethos that we can apply to modern day living, and so on and so on and so on, right? And so I apply that way of thinking to everything I do. And so that shows up in the way that I coach business owners. It shows up in the way that I train myself every day. It shows up in the way that I have a social life and the community around me. It shows up in the way that I build my business. It shows up in the way that I build a charity and so on, right? And so for me, sticking out one way of thinking and being really vocal on that one way of thinking has compounded over the last 15 years to the point where we can now build a big business that has a lot of reach. And so there's a lot to be said about compounding the kind of congruency and sticking to one thing and not getting distracted, right? Like I would seriously vet opportunities because people get excited. Oh, and now my business is bigger and now I'm starting to make a bit of noise. So-and-so wants me to work with them or they do or that. I've got this new opportunity and it's like, is that congruent with your main core message? I went to this stage where during lockdown, I was looking for various business opportunities to generate revenue. One of them was I was approached by a company who were essentially offering to give me the tools and resources to learn to trade and wanted me to produce a vlog of that journey. And so if you imagine all of my customers and everyone had known me for, you know what, mate? I've just realized I turned the light on. Ready? I'll start that again. I memorized it by now, so I'll just start it again.
Yeah, right.
Cut. So during 2020, during lockdown, I was looking for lots of different ways to generate revenue, lots of opportunities. Obviously, my business was really disrupted. And so what I did is I was actually approached by a company who were involved with trading, and they were a trading platform. And they wanted to have a kind of authentic vlog of someone learning to trade for the first time. And so they approached me to produce this weekly vlog on me learning to trade. And initially, I was going through this process of, is this congruent? Because on one hand, it would have been great for me to earn that money and to go through that and maybe even have a skill at the end of it. And I was always interested in trading a little bit. But on the other hand, is that something my customers, and my database and my following would see as congruent? It kind of looks like I've stopped the whole character development messaging I just spoke to you about. And now I've gone down the route of generating revenue and being really kind of focused on that. And the markets and all that sort of stuff. And so, I said to them, look, I think I can take this on, but it's got to come from a place of being congruent with those values and telling the story based on my situation. And what I really loved about that is, initially I thought there's no way this would work. It wouldn't be congruent. But the conversations I had with them were really around, we want you to tell the story of the reality of trading and the fact that it's not this crazy Instagram life and, suddenly you get rich quick and all this sort of stuff, which is totally against my kind of values and messaging. And really, it's really about applying yourself, having loads of self-discipline. It's about having the courage to take the right risk and doing your due diligence. It's about having a solid habit routine and so on and so on and so on. And I was like, this completely aligns with who I am and my values and my messaging, right? So it then became a no-brainer, and I did that for about 12 weeks, which was really good fun. And so I think it's really important that you have a way of assessing new opportunities.
Calibrating and checking.
Right. And assessing new opportunities against your values and against your messaging. Because it could be that at first they don't seem right, but then they do actually work out. Or they do seem right, but then they don't work out. And it's just stepping back, pausing for a minute, and using that as a calibration, like you said, to kind of really measure whether or not something is worth your while doing, or if it could cause long-term damage.
This is a quick shout out to the sponsor of this show, Shield, who help us deliver this podcast along with all the social media that goes with it to help us get it out to more people, which leaves us to focus on just creating more great conversations. If you want to start, delegate or optimize your social media or podcast, or if you want to build your very own online course or program, get in touch with the team at shieldglobal.io. I agree. There's a real fine line between, saying, well, maybe there's ways that it does align, and actually trying to fit a round peg in a square hole. I see a lot of people trying to force relationships like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, okay, you did, ballet when you was a kid, and now I talk about ballet once and my thing, and now it's like, oh, that fits. We're a perfect match. It's not. Like, I wouldn't force things.
Yeah.
And the three main kind of issues that I see with entrepreneurs when they do go out of congruency is, one, like you said, they get bored of their own product, bored of their own talk, and they feel like they've got to say something new and profound, and then they think they've got to come up with a new product just because they're bored of the old one. And I would say to that, there is a lot of merit in saying the same thing over and over again. As you say, go back on my YouTube channel, I'm saying the same message around wealth building, trading, from like 7 years ago, same thing. And there's a lot of merit in doing that, builds a lot of trust. But also you have to remember that the people who listened to you back then, they're not listening to that part. They're not listening for that anymore, right? But new people are. So you need to focus on catching the new people. It's not about keep educating the same people that have been there all these years. You've helped them. They've moved on.
Do you know what as well,
looking
Jason?
at you anymore.
Because we have over 1 million people every single month watching our videos, right? And our videos are basically on the same thing. It's basically me talking about character development on almost all of our video content. Yeah. And I don't go into the real ins and outs of character development we do in our program, but not in those videos, because it would just go over people's heads. I might have some interesting polarizing points, which I'll share on my organic social media, but on adverts specifically, which gets the most views, we'll make sure that customers in particular see the same point about me talking about the 3 C's, confidence, conduct, concentration, within 60 seconds and the impact that has on developing your child's character. They'll see 5 videos talking about just that one 60-second subject. And it could be that only by video 4 do they get it, and by video 5, they can finish my sentences, right? Now you imagine they've watched these so many times, they're like, it's confidence, concentration. I know exactly what he's going to say. Now you've got to a point where they've completely resonated with your message because you said the same thing 5 times, and suddenly it's sunk in to the point where it's like you know them, right? And so there's, I think people are in a race with entrepreneurship. It's, like we spoke about in the last, I'm a bit worried in the last episode of entrepreneurship where, whether or not we just gave entrepreneurship a really bad rep. Do you know what I mean? We were just moaning about entrepreneurship for about an hour. We had to cut off the episode at one point. But I think that's reality, right? People are thinking it's just like entrepreneurship. You go into it and you'd be amazing within a year. Here's the reality. You're in the trenches. You're talking about the same thing every day for years and years and years and years and years. Progress isn't linear. Once you talked about it enough, it gains traction, and then suddenly, bang, you're doing really well.
That's it.
That's the reality.
And that is literally happening. Like, I've been saying the same thing on my YouTube channel for 6-7 years, and now it's getting like massive traction. So now it's just starting to take off. One of my mentors Dr. John DiMartini, go back and look. 25 years he's been saying the same thing every single weekend. And if you watch any one of his videos, if you followed him for any amount of time, you can almost words coming. You can mouth the words that he's about to say. You just know the words he's going to say.
Do you know what,
every
though?
piece of content.
It's like you've got to get really good at saying the same thing and looking just as enthusiastic as you say it. Right?
Yeah.
It's like a band who have got their like best song and they go on stage. And everyone's like, play the song, play the best song that we're all here to see.
And they're like, oh, I hate this song.
You're like, before you go on, you'd be like, oh my God, I spent the last 10, 20 years just playing this song. I'm sick of it. You go on, and you just pretend you're having the time of your life saying it, right? And I don't think I'm at the stage where I need to pretend, because I do enjoy talking about what I'm talking about, and you know, I deeply care about solving these problems for people. But I think for a lot of people who are then in that position where it's like, oh, you don't have to talk about the same thing. Yes, you do.
Yeah.
You know, if you want your message to resonate with as many people as possible, the chances are you've only started a business in the last 5 years. The chances are you've barely scratched the surface of how much you need to talk about that. Dedicate your life to something. Talk about it for 20 years, right? And then you become the top 1% of talking about that subject, and that's where the real fruits of your labor are. You know, up until the first 10 years, you're competing with everyone else talking about the same thing. But by year 10, you're so good at speaking about it and articulating it. You know, it's like you're the best in the world at articulating that one point. Right?
That's it. And I always think about it this way. Everything moves in cycles. Like I always say, one day it's going to be your turn. And I see these niches and businesses go round and round and round and round. Like, for instance, like artists, right? A lot of people in my lifetime, art, there's no money in art. You know, you only get paid for art when you die and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Then NFTs came around, and it was sought after to get digital artists, right? And that was their time. And then that comes around, and who are the press going to come after? Who are the news going to come after to talk to? Who's the expert in that field? You, because you've been saying the same thing or drawing the same digital art for that long, right? And you're going to be in the space. You're going to be the one that comes up first on Google.
It's having the patience, but you only really have patience
having the patience
for something
to do that. Yeah, absolutely.
But you only have patience for something you love about.
Everything moves in cycles.
If you don't love it, if you don't love the game and you don't really care about the thing you're trying to solve, you don't have the patience for it. That's the reason it's so important, right? That's the reason it's so important you find something you're passionate about, or at least have a deep interest in. You know?
Yeah, all these link together. All of these episodes that we've been speaking about all link together, and there's a common message throughout, which is why this is called the chief aim, right? It is the one thing, and that is why that's why the podcast exists. But the other issue that I see, which I think you touched on as well, is you have to be really good at filtering out opportunities, because as you get bigger and you say the same thing, I must have 10 emails a day coming from YouTube at the moment offering me to promote this, promote that, do this video, do that video. And you get more and more. So you have to be you have to be acutely, like, really strict on, and you have to be a really good, weighing up and filtering out these opportunities, because you can start to lose yourself and go, you get swept away. And before you know it, you've sold out, and the people you're actually doing it for, and the people you've been serving all these years, you're back to square one, because people are like, that guy's sold out. That guy isn't really who he says he is. And it's just not worth it. It's really not worth it.
Do you know what? There's another element here of congruency, which I've been thinking about this week. I had a mentor of mine who was a martial arts business coach, actually. And he said, if you really want to be great in the world of martial arts, business, you can't just be Mr. Character Development on the screen and in the class. You have to be like Mr. Character Development in everything in your life. Like it's got to be the way in which you live your life with your family, with your friends, when no one's looking, when you're out in public. Everything needs to be congruent to the message that you want to instill there. And I look at other entrepreneurs or other business owners who are starting up, even competition of ours, and they're completely incongruent when it comes to how they show up on their social media, how they show up on their stories on social media, which are also public, and the things they say and the way they speak and the music they listen to, and imagine you're trying to work with kids, and you're trying to instill confidence in parents that they can trust you. And then there you are, getting really drunk, half naked, swearing on your stories on Instagram. You know, or you're telling the world that you've got the world's best discipline and you're a world champion and so on and so on and so on. And then you're out on the street and you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, or you're in a pub till 3 a.m. and do you know what I mean? It's like you're acting you're acting in a way which is just unethical or incongruent. Even if it's not unethical, you're not breaking any laws or rules or whatever. But it's just bizarre that the person that says this on the screen is like that out there. Yeah. You know, some people can get away with it if that's how you want to behave, and you were living this fast-paced life, and you know you were someone else. But if your whole thing is around, you know, the kind of values that you want to portray, and then you do something opposite in your in your social life or outside of work, you will lose trust so quickly. Yeah. And eventually, you know, life's got a way of shining a light on kind of these sorts of situations, and people will start to see it. And when they do, it'll be like, we can't trust you.
This is a really good thing that you can do. I love this. I can't remember who said this to me, but they said, if you wouldn't be... Imagine that a TV crew comes and puts cameras all around your house like Big Brother, right? Would you be happy with that? Yeah. Because they said, if you wouldn't be happy with people watching in on you 24/7, there's going to be something there that you don't want the world to see. Yeah. And that is something that you don't love or own, or you're not being truthful about, and you're ashamed of, right? Or you're guilty of. And it's a really fascinating, you know, I get the point that it's kind of an analogy and a make-believe situation, because no one wants to see you in bed and all the rest of it, right? And go to the toilet. But it's something to think about, because it's like, are you being congruent in your life as you are out onto the camera? Because that can be really, really humbling. So I just had a guest come around here on my show, and he turned up, and I invite everyone here so that they can actually see my life and how I live, and my family are here, and they can ask him questions. You know, I've got nothing to hide. And he turns up, and I'm sitting there trading, and he's like, "Oh, you actually trade?" And I'm like, "Yeah, wow. Why wouldn't I?" And he said, "Oh, I thought people just like just showed it off as a thing." And I was like, "Wow." Yeah,
what a different life. And that person, I mean, they must be surrounded by so many people that do that to think that's normal.
Exactly. Yeah.
Although, do you trade, Jason, or do you just sit there with loads of screens like this? No one actually knows. Actually, yeah, you do it live, don't you? So there you go. It doesn't get more authentic than that.
Exactly. That's why I started it. I basically started sharing mine online for congruency, to get to basically eliminate all of that.
So that transparency early on when you were building a business built that trust, which then built the following. So basically your entire following is built on that foundation of transparency, which I really 100%. Like. One of the things I've started doing a lot of, especially this year, is really documenting everything I do. And it's like, you know, here's what I'm doing today on stories, especially, and then on like reels. And with the team at Shield, you know, I do 1 reel a day, but from September we're doing 8 reels a day, right? At the moment, I think I do 3, and a lot of it is a bit uncomfortable, because you're a bit like, I don't really want to share all this personal stuff with strangers who, let's be honest, 50% probably won't like me, and I'm cool with that. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it in the first place. But I think you know, there's a bit of uncomfortability there. And then you kind of think, well, if they don't like you based on you just sharing the things you do every day, then they obviously have very different values to you, and they're not the kind of right audience for you, and so it doesn't really matter, does it? And I think if you're not ashamed of showing who you are, and if you've got that congruency, right, the things I talk about from a professional point of view with martial arts and character development show up in my life, and the things I do in my life, you know, as a dad, as someone who brings discipline to their life and trains really hard and overcomes challenges and A, B, and C, right? Like, people want to see that. And the more people are often looking for insights into are they credible and congruent or not. And so if you're the business owner who talks about this stuff professionally and then says, right, here's what I do in my personal life, here's a raw video, a raw insight of me doing this stuff, you know, I think that carries a lot of weight.
Definitely. So that's one, I guess, in terms of tips, one thing that I would say is have a think about that camera on the wall, fly on the wall thing, and say, is there anything I'm not being quite congruent about? And the other thing that I would recommend, which is a good tip for anyone who's an entrepreneur here, is like go back through your social media and start reposting. Like most people, it blows me away at how many people aren't reposting stuff because of a fear of, oh, I've already talked about that. I've already spoken about that. I've got to post on that. Just start reposting it literally on a weekly basis. Go back to one and keep scrolling through. And if you've got 100 posts, start recycling them on a weekly basis. Then you've got 10 posts a day or 20 posts a day. And now you're like, every week someone new seeing something. And it's not like the people that you're worried about, oh, they'll just unfollow me. They won't, because they've already heard it and listened to it. They get what you're about. You're trying to capture the people that need to hear the message. So just by reposting all of the stuff you've already done can be a massive benefit.
Do you know what? This is if you look at a lot of the stuff Gary Vee does, right? He'll
you sound more congruent. Yeah. You're repeating yourself.
Well, exactly. He'll literally find something he said 10 years ago. He'll show that on one side of the screen, and then he'll be like, here I am, still talking about the same thing. And it's like, wow, that's so congruent. He said this about emotional intelligence 15 years ago, and here he is saying the same thing. And it's
great example.
It's like, perfect example of someone who's stayed congruent, same messaging, and has ended up with a really strong following of people who trust him. And it's a really good tool. Look back at your life, look at the things you've done. What I'm doing a lot of now is I'm using a lot of home movies, right? So I've got loads of like old home videos of me as a kid, or me with my family when I was younger, or me competing in martial arts when I was younger. I'm repurposing that. I've got videos of me competing in martial arts as an adult, or doing traveling around the world, or doing adventures, or base jumping and skydiving, all this sort of stuff. I'm repurposing that because it's like, here's an insight into my life where I've taken risks. Here's an insight where I talk about adventure. Well, here's some adventures I've been on. I talk about martial arts and losing in matches in martial arts, and a video of someone else raising their hand next to me while my hand's down. And, this sort of stuff is just so powerful because I talk about earning your losses. And it's like, well, I've been through it. Here's an example. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I think the more you can show off, almost look at congruency like something you want to show off, a little bit like credibility and authority, right? So if you imagine social proof and testimonials for your business, it's something you want to show off, right? Credibility, you've written books, you want awards, you want to show that off. See congruency in the same way within your business. Something you want to raise and show off. How can you show congruency? You've got to stick at the same thing, saying the same thing for a long time. If you're pretty fresh, then try and find things that you spoke about in the past. If you haven't spoken to camera, you could look at home videos, right? You could even look at the things that you've been posting when you're younger or whatever it is, and see if there's congruency or things that tie together, which then raises that bar. I think that's quite a good tip, right?
Absolutely, mate. I think disappointment and mistrust only comes from an unmet expectation. So the idea is that how can you always show up how people will expect you to show up? And if you can just do that all the time and get into the habit of doing that, you find that your values play out in your real world, and it flows into your business, into your conversations, into your habits and routine. And I think we should do an episode on habits and routine as well. Yeah. Because I think that'll be a really good one. Definitely. Congruency. Don't break it. Understand what it is, where you're out of congruency, and you'll build trust. And you'll.
What can you do to visibly raise your congruency in the marketplace, right? To show people how congruent you are. How can you show off your congruency? What would it take to show off your congruency?
Really cool. Awesome, man. Well, I think that wraps it up nicely. And if you guys have got value from this, let us know. If there's any other topics you'd like us to discuss. And next week, we'll be back talking about habits. So until then, take care. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you then. If you're enjoying these podcasts, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're really getting value from these, we'd really love it if you could let us know on our review page. We'll see you next week.